So we've talked about the importance of cloud computing in providing access to assistive technologies, and we've talked about the growing impact of accessibility. Now let's turn our attention to some of the challenges. We do have challenges that we're encountering in the area of inclusive or accessible cloud computing. So I'm going to raise a few of these over the next few slides for your awareness. We'll start with Siri. Siri has gotten a lot of press and is quite a remarkable tool that allows people to ask questions. And Siri is an Apple tool that runs on a mobile device that provides the answers to the person. So John Stokes over at Wired, he explained that Siri and Apple's cloud could really be leading to the advent of real artificial intelligence. In the past, when we had these question and answer or input and output pairs, they were static. It took somebody a significant amount of time to get into an application or the tool and to make the changes and to then propagate those changes out to others. But today we're in a very different situation. Because this is delivered on the cloud, it's very easy for Apple engineers to get a new idea or to determine that something is needed and to make that change in one place and to have that reach millions of people in a very, very short amount of time. So in this way we have a system that can be adapted very quickly. The other thing to note is that Apple is getting input from millions of users and millions of transactions, and through that they're able to see the kinds of things that they might want to do differently. Because of all of that input, they have a way of identifying how they can improve what they're providing. They can improve the intelligence. And so they can just make a quick change. They can change the input-output pair. It's readily available to millions of people. They can take the input from these millions of people and they can adapt the system and again very quickly turn it around. And so we can see how this could over time very quickly evolve. The intelligence can very quickly evolve. Now unfortunately you may have caught a tiny problem with what I shared there, and that's that in the very next instant of making a change, millions of users have access to that change, and Apple engineers can look at the trends and the kinds of queries and add responses based on what's trending. That might be good for public or informal kinds of interactions, but in a corporate or a government environment, it's very likely that the organization is going to frown upon employees sharing their private, potentially confidential information with Siri or other cloud-based assistive technologies, depending on the type of cloud. There are privacy issues, there are application security issues and data security issues, and with public cloud and software as a service, we don't really know where the data is stored and who has access to that data. So if you're using an assistive technology that relies on the cloud and you're very comfortable with that personally, it would be great to be able to leverage that technology for your work environment. Unfortunately, you may not be able to. We're seeing that more and more enterprises are looking at a BYOD or bring your own device model, where they have their employees bring their own personal mobile devices to the enterprise network. And you pay for the device, but you get the advantage of not having to carry around two smartphones, for example. Unfortunately, your device is likely to have to comply with the security policy, and there's a chance that the wonderful assistive technologies that you've grown comfortable with using are going to be deactivated in that enterprise or government environment, in your work environment. So from an enterprise perspective, we have to think about and consider that we have to think about the assistive technologies that users might be using and consider the security implications. And we have to make sure that there's a reasonable alternative to support persons with disabilities. Maybe that is not mobile, maybe they're not able to take advantage of a Siri-like capability, or nobody within the organization is able to take advantage of that, which is really unfortunate. So we also need to be aware that disabling assistive technologies that are supporting situational disabilities could adversely impact productivity. Your organization might not be as productive as you could be if you were to provide a secure, accessible way for people to use these cloud services. So these are some of the challenges that we're seeing in the area of security and the conflict between, in some cases, security and these great opportunities available with cloud-delivered assistive technologies. We've talked about assistive technologies delivered on the cloud and some of the security challenges that could make it so that we can't use those assistive technologies. Now we're going to switch our perspective and talk about situations where cloud services are inaccessible because the assistive technologies just don't function the way we expect for them to function. A little over a year ago, 2 colleagues of mine reviewed the Apache Virtual Computing Lab. That's an open source system that dynamically provisions and brokers access to dedicated compute environments for an end user. As an example, you might have a very complex configuration of several different applications all working together, and you want to make that available to any student who has a need for education that involves that set of complex software. Or perhaps they just can't run it on their machine. So what you can do is you can provide access to a virtual machine, a machine that is running on the cloud, and that person can then, from their machine, from a client, access that virtual machine and have access to all of that software, which is quite a very helpful thing to be able to do. This kind of technology can also be used not just when you're providing education and training and enablement, but it also works well when you're trying to test out, when you're trying to run testing on software and you have a large number of different configurations that you need to be able to test on. Rather than having a dedicated computer or set of computers for every variation that you need to test on, you can deploy these virtual machines that are, several different virtual machines running on a single set of servers or in the cloud, which is a wonderful thing. What we discovered, though, what we did was we ran our standard accessibility tests that incorporate both U.S. Section 508 standards and Web Content Accessibility Guidelines with CAG 2.0 Level A accessibility standards. So there's a checklist with some standards that we use. Let's put it that way. We'll talk more about those in a moment. They also used IBM Rational Policy Tester version 8, and then they did some manual testing. Things like, can I navigate with a keyboard? Does the visual formatting work for people with a variety of disabilities? Do things time out so quickly that a person with a disability wouldn't be able to access them? Does the contrast work? And so on. And they also tested using some assistive technologies. They used the JAWS for Windows screen reader. And what happened was they encountered problems using those assistive technologies with the virtual machines. They used a remote desktop connection to access the virtual machine from their Windows machine. And they immediately saw that they were not able to run Zoom Text, that's a screen magnifying application, in the remote environment because of a display driver issue. When they talked to the vendor, they discovered that assistive technology did not yet support the Windows remote desktop connection. So this is a very common way of leveraging cloud computing, and um, yet the assistive technologies have not all caught up to being able to provide that service. So that's a bit of a challenge. They also saw that they were not able to authorize JAWS in a Windows 7 remote desktop image. What they had to do was provide a local copy of JAWS running on their machine, in addition to having a copy of JAWS installed on the remote image. Now, at first we thought there might be a double charge for licensing, but it doesn't work like that. The license is actually charged based on what is running on the local client. So there isn't a double charge there. But still, if you haven't provided JAWS in the remote desktop environment, or in the virtual image, as part of that virtual image, a user who is trying to use JAWS will not be able to do that. So that is a big challenge there. If you realize there's less of a challenge, if you are creating those images and you don't realize, you could end up having to redeploy your images and deal with any instances that were created that didn't already have the JAWS screen reader in it. So the key takeaway here is that it's important to test the interaction of the assistive technologies and remote images delivered on the cloud, and to make sure that the assistive technologies function as you would expect for them to. And it's also important to make sure that the images contain the assistive technologies so that persons with disabilities are able to access them. The third challenge that I'd like to share with you is standards compliance. In general, Section 508 and WCAG provide the guidance that we need for accessibility. If you look at what's written in Section 508 about how applications should function, and you look at the WCAG guidelines, you'll see that there are some very concrete, specific things that you need to do. So for web interfaces that are used in cloud computing, either the cloud infrastructure that you're putting together or the cloud services, there really isn't anything magical or new when it comes to checking that a personalization service, for example, that's delivered on the cloud is actually accessible. So that is not going to change. But what you might see is that even though your enterprise complies with accessibility standards for applications and services, you might have forgotten about the importance of accessibility for the administrative and management interfaces. We had a gentleman who happens to be blind who was unable to use an administration console to create new images because the console just was not accessible. So he wasn't able to view metered usage reports, he wasn't able to create new images or instances, he wasn't able to do any of those things. So when you're developing a cloud platform, when you're evaluating cloud vendors, you need to consider accessibility as one of your criteria for adoption and ensure that the administrative interface is tested as well. That's a third challenge that we've experienced.